情感，然后可以阅读相关的内容，然后可以进行一些娱乐，比如玩游戏啊，比如看直播啊等等。
Back in 2000, when Ma studied at a police school in northern China, he realized he didn't feel like everyone else.
因为他们都找女朋友，然后谈恋爱，但是我对长得好看的同性的男生，我反而觉得对我更有吸引力。所以那个时候我就到互联网上去找这样的一些资料，然后希望能够告诉我自己我到底是谁。互联网上所有的信息都是负面的，都是错的，就是说同性恋要电击疗法，要被治疗，然后要吃药等等。
After visiting some foreign websites with different attitudes to homosexuality, Ma created his own site for a Chinese audience, encouraging people that
他们也是正常的，他们不用自卑，然后也不用自杀。
Even though attitudes towards homosexuals are slowly changing in China, it's still a social stigma. The virtual world of Blood, where members can be open about their sexuality, is for most a striking contrast to their real lives. This is live streaming, a function added to Blood in late 2015, right as the internet craze was starting to take off in China. Many self-made stars like Jin make decent amounts of money by receiving audiences' virtual currencies and gifts.
我们不是彼此的初恋，初恋这种事儿多不靠谱啊。
For Kyle and Klaus, a couple who have come out, live streaming on Blood means something different.
其实我经常会收到很多粉丝的一些互动的留言，就是类似就是说你们让我们看到了同志情侣之间的一些希望啊，我看到这样的留言我是很欣慰。
The government's rules for acceptable content online may shift quickly in China, with LGBT material in a grey area. Many companies feel the chill of the recent internet crackdown, but Blue City still runs as usual. Ma has won the Chinese government's trust by helping with HIV prevention among gay men. A third of the company's staff are dedicated to screening pornographic and politically sensitive content.
我不太多的愿意去对抗，我更多的愿意去对话，去改变他们的想法。我觉得这个可能在中国来说是更有效的。
In the past 5 years, Blue City has grown from a team of 7 people to a promising business with about 250 staff. Ma said the company earned over $15 million last year, mainly through advertising and selling virtual currencies to live streaming audiences. Now the company is expanding overseas.
我希望吧，通过我们的努力，Blue能够成为全球第一家在美国纳斯达克或者是纽交所上市的这样的同质互联网公司。
This is Rich Chiga. He's a Chinese rapper by way of Indonesia, and he's very popular on the internet. This is Joji. He's a Japanese-Australian singer, and he's also very popular on the internet. Plus, Joji invented the Harlem Shake meme. Let me say that again. This guy, Joji, in the blood bathtub, invented the Harlem Shake meme. But we'll come back to that. So Rich and Joji are both signed to 88 Rising, an entertainment company hoping to build a lasting global brand that will outlive singular moments of virality. They primarily create content combining Asian culture and hip-hop, a formula that apparently pleases the internet gods greatly. They've only been around for 18 months, but they're already putting up major label numbers.
I think that we have an unprecedented collective of talent, a group of predominantly Asian artists, really making waves globally, which from an independent point of view as well.
88's founder, Sean Miyashiro, cut his teeth launching Vice's electronic music channel, Thump. But quickly, Sean became interested in life beyond dance music.
I knew that after launching a whole content platform that I have kind of the ability and the know-how to do it again, but for what was the question?
So Sean moved to the Bronx to start over and figure it out. He couldn't afford an office space, so he worked out of his car at the top of a grimy parking garage.
Everything kind of started here. If you look around, this is my environment. This is my serenity, really. 88 Rising was built here. Built on the grounds of LA Fitness residence in a parking garage. I was living in the Bronx. I'm just damn, where the hell do I go? So I just come up here and I just kind of figure things out every single day. Being okay, what the hell is this thing? Coming here was kind of like my own kind of private office, basically. To be honest, I would even go to the bathroom here. I would take pisses here, you know what I mean? It was, it's just too far to go back down there. When I need Wi-Fi, I'd spend a good part of the day at Dunkin' Donuts. Hi, how are you? Can I get a chicken snack wrap?
Before 88 Rising officially launched, Sean caught a surprise break in the form of a Twitter friendship with a funny 16-year-old kid from Indonesia named Brian, who taught himself English by watching Rubik's Cube tutorial videos on YouTube. Seriously, that's true.
I thought his Twitter was genius, from the future, just crazy, and just the shit that he was saying, the memes he was making. But I didn't know that he rapped or anything like that. I really didn't, and he came up with that stick 2 weeks later.
12 in the morning, pop shells for a living and baby gon' smell blood trail every minute, bro.
Dat Stick was Brian's first ever attempt at making a rap song, and it immediately went viral.
Everything was great about it, but the one thing that I noticed is the song was hard as hell. Just everything about it, man. Just it was menacing, bro.
Soon after the video dropped, Brian signed with 88 Rising.
I'll FaceTime with Rich. Sorry for calling you Rich Chiga on my phone, Rich. Brian, he gets super pissed off that he's saved in my phone as Rich Chiga. He's like, dude, am I not a human to you? What's good, bro?
What's good, brother?
How you doing?
Doing great. I did the sound check.
How was it?
It was tight.
So, Brian could definitely rap, but some viewers understandably took offense at a Chinese kid satirizing rap cliches and calling himself Rich Chiga. But if a group of well-known rappers saw the video and genuinely liked it, that could at least help validate Brian as a legit hip-hop artist. Plus, it could be really funny.
It was just kind of an idea that I just had on the spot. Everything the rappers say is better and funnier and smarter and wittier. It's just more entertaining. We just edited it as tight as possible, put it up, and It really works.
12 in the morning, pop shells for the living in.
Yo, this nigga got a pouch on and a Reebok pouch. This is the hardest nigga of all time.
You said when you come for a chigga like me, that was dope.
Like, it's just lit, and I think people will take it as a joke at first, but it's like if he ran with that and kept doing more videos like that, it's just lit.
You know, I'd never been to America before, and like all of a sudden, just like I see like all the rappers that I listen to just like reacting to my stuff, and I was like, what? How did this happen?
The reaction video also went viral and even led to a remix of Dat Stick featuring Wu-Tang's Ghostface.
I'll get on that track. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Really, on the remix?
Yeah. Oh, you know him?
And yeah, the remix went viral too. Brian has since acknowledged the misstep in his name and claims he may change it. But for the time being, he's still Rich Chigga to his fans. An ever-growing global audience, hungry for more releases from emerging talent around the world.
I didn't know that it was gonna be this impactful and this important to people, and I'm very thankful and blessed that it has. And every day now that I wake up, it's like it's just like a new mission every day.
A major part of that mission involves Joji. Remember the bloody bath guy? He's a former YouTube personality in the middle of a career transition.
The sound of this song, Will He, it's like a trap song that you can like slow dance to. Awkward prom shit, you know what I mean? I used to do crazy episodic internet videos. It was going well. And one day, it was me and a few friends just in a room. We were casually chilling, and then someone plays the song, and it's brand new at the time. I happened to have a lot of costumes laying around, so I told the other guys, I was like, get in these costumes and let's just dance to it. Like, who cares? We were like, okay, let's just go crazy at the drop. So that video goes up. I go to sleep, and the next morning, everyone's doing it, like next morning. That taught me a lot about the internet, how people want to just be a part of something. And from that point on, something changed, and I was a little better at understanding demographics and people and what they want to see and what they want to hear. I was friends with a couple other artists who were affiliated with 88, and then I also started to realize that 88 is the bridge between Western and Asian entertainment, and I really wanted to be a part of that.
Joji just released the In Tongues EP, his first project as a serious artist.
Joji's In Tongues record came out a couple weeks ago. It's #2 on Billboard on the R&B charts, which is crazy for, independent release, and he's like a brand new artist.
And the success is even more impressive, knowing he went from creating something like this.
It's just Taco Bell. What could possibly go wrong?
To creating something Tonight, Rich Chigga has a show in New York City. Tickets sold out in an hour.
I came here, I'm first online. I was here at 1. I was the third person online.
So why'd you get here so early?
Because I want to see Rich Chigga. I want to touch him.
What do you guys think of Joji?
Oh my God!
That's not dad, son. You guys cop the new EP or like?
Yeah. I woke up at 6 in the morning just to cop that shit. And then I listened to it, and that shit started making me cry.
This is actually kind of exciting. Every time, this never gets old. Like, you live online and social media, but like, there's nothing like just being with the people.
More often than not, viral success happens by accident. And then after an appearance on Ellen or Jimmy Kimmel, the creator's star power fizzles out. But Idiot Rising has figured out how to turn potential gimmicks into brands with an actual following that keeps coming back for the next thing.
Oh, shit!
So keep an eye out for Idiot's next move. But more than likely, it won't be covered on network television or terrestrial radio. Although, as they've already proven, nowadays that really doesn't matter.
Online retailer Farfetch is betting it can shape the future. This is its concept store, showcasing the latest in retail tech.
How do you capture all of that fantastic information that you gather in store with customers, touch and feel products? And we created a concept called the connected rail.
Position closed on Japanese yen at 106.545. So we have profit, £200.
Whichever products you touch and pick up in the store are automatically sent to your app. This is effectively what you've created is your in-store wish list. In the middle, you'll see essentially a hologram of the product. What the customer sees, they control the experience on a touch device. What this allows the customer to do is take elements of products and then add their own style to it. Right, so this is the connected mirror. So in this example, I see my products. I select a coat, and that's tried it, and it's slightly too big for me. So what I can do is choose an alternative size and send a request to the sales associate, and they'll bring that size to me in the fitting room mirror. You'll also see that we've got some product recommendations here. Crucially, the sales associate's able to push items into the mirror from their device. If you wanted to, you could simply use the mirror and pay and go. Your items would then be packed and dispatched to you afterwards.
Do you want me to turn you so you're looking outwards? Yes, please. How about there? First time we came out with B, Jade said it feels like I've been released from prison. Do you want these, Mrs?
Definitely.
Definitely. Right. Yeah. And she could say hello to everybody, people she hadn't seen for months.
It's
Jade.
Jade.
Oh.
So you can talk to Jade through this.
Hi, Katie. She's there. Hi.
Every time anyone's seen her, they want to know why she's there. And it's kind of the opposite of when you're in a wheelchair and people see you and they kind of go, oh, should I look? I don't know what the right protocol is. When there's a tiny robot with its bright little eyes going around just looking happy everywhere, it really opens you up for conversation.
You've got some friends here, look.
Hiya. When I saw her for the first time, I remember thinking, this is going to change things. This is one of those points where if this was a book, this would be the cliffhanger. condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which means that I have a lot of dislocations, there's a lot of pain, and a lot of seizures and whatnot. So I can end up on my own in my room for long periods of time.
Yeah, my love.
A lot of the time, with a condition like my own, of course there's the pain, and the pain is bad, and the dislocations are bad, and the seizures and being in paralysis and never knowing whether you're going to be able to wake up properly tomorrow, that's bad. But what's worse still is being able to count the number of people you see a day on one hand.
Are you ready?
Sure am, I'm just hoping the connection's going to stay.
Yeah, me too. Alright, here we go.
When you're used to just the same little metre by metre and a half window every day, and you've been there for months, being able to just see the sky from somewhere else, or the tops of trees, or a sign, is incredible. Or being able to have that kind of chat in the car that most people would probably take for granted.
I'm going to go past Grandma and Grandad so you can give them a wave. Now, if Jade is particularly seizure-y, she can still take part. And that's brilliant, really, because before she would just be left in a bed or in a house with just her carers. It's quite a small world, that.
Right, so there's one of them. Here, this costume I'm busy making at the moment. When I'm not on bed rest and I'm not just wearing pyjamas all the time, I enjoy being able to dress as different characters and go to Comic Cons and that kind of thing, because it just lets me show a different side of myself, and it's a bit of fun. If you can't go out that often, you've got to enjoy it when you do. Was that? Good. It's one of those weird things where I want to not have to use B because I want to be well enough to be able to go to those places myself. Like, it really makes a big difference to me to be able to go into school. But the thing is, with my condition fluctuating all of the time, I can't go into school reliably. He's written out bigger on the board. Thank you. Today's the first day that I've been in school via B, and so far it's interesting. Still a few little things that we need to work out, but for the most part, I think it's going fairly well. And it's brilliant because I can really tell the difference between today and yesterday. How yesterday I forced myself to go into school when I wasn't very well, and I was really tired afterwards and ended up having loads of seizures. Whereas today, I've been able to do all of the work. I've been able to keep a clear head and not be ill, which means I'm able to be more focused on my schoolwork.
So there is my first step of working, is to simplify root 8. The algebra test is next week.
Now I'm trying to make friendships which I'll be able to maintain with B. Before that, I end up letting people down quite often. B gives me hope, yeah. She's just always there. And if I can't do something, she can. And if I need sort of assistance to be able to make commitments, then she's there, and she means that I feel like a more valuable person because I'm more reliable.
it debuted, the 4G wireless we have today allowed people for the first time to hit the road and explore unknown places with only a smartphone for directions. When 5G arrives, it could enable driverless cars to take us there as well. 5G stands for 5th generation mobile networks or wireless systems. It's insanely fast and can accommodate a lot more connected devices. But the reason it's being called revolutionary is because 5G will allow connected devices to speak to each other as well as people.
Right now we're living in a world where really it's a one-way experience.
That's Bloomberg tech reporter Ian King.
The network talks to your phone, you look at your phone and access data, then you send something back to the network. What we're being told about 5G is that really for the first time we're going to see machines communicating with each other over mobile networks in a meaningful way.
5G could end up being 100 times faster than what we have now, with speeds that could reach 20 gigabits per second. In plain English, that means downloading a full-length HD movie in seconds. 5G will also increase total bandwidth, which we will need in order to accommodate the growing Internet of Things. We're talking about the class of devices like internet-connected refrigerators, thermostats, dog collars, but 5G will enable many, many more.
Things like your utility network, factories, where machines are just sat there not connected at all. Suddenly they're all going to be connected. Suddenly we're going to be able to have real-time monitoring. Other things like cars, like utility poles, like your light, the light poles.
But perhaps the biggest advance will be a huge reduction in communication lag time, known as latency. A network of driverless cars will need the speed of 5G to ping each other multiple times per second to avoid collisions. Near instantaneous data transfers could allow doctors to perform surgery remotely with a robotic scalpel. So how will all this work? First, you need to improve network density.
And that's just a fancy word for saying you put more towers out there. What we're being told is that's not actually the case with 5G.
The idea is 5G will not only use the existing mobile spectrum, but also tap into higher frequencies called millimeter waves. Millimeter waves can carry more data, but only travel short distances. This may mean you'll see a lot more of these base stations around town. And the new towers may have as many as 100 antenna ports, compared to about a dozen on 4G cell towers. So when will we get 5G? Getting 5G ready is expected to cost providers $275 billion over 7 years in the US alone. Look for the first 5G service to pop up in big cities sometime in 2019.
The cubicle represents a tyranny. It confines your imagination, your thoughts, into a small physical area. Imagine pretty much every software engineer or finance person being able to, disconnect from their desk and look at holographic monitors on a beach and doing their work from there. That's not going to be science fiction. It's the modern office place.
Silicon Valley is all about building the future. A startup called Meta thinks it's getting there first, thanks to a big bet that it's made on augmented reality.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Welcome to Meta.
Thank you.
Call it a 360-degree office where you can spatialize your thoughts as part of your workflow for education, architecture, design, engineering, etc.
People often mix up augmented reality with virtual reality. VR totally blocks your ability to see or hear the real world. AR overlays holograms onto what you already see. Meta has tried to make its version of the workspace feel familiar.
You grab the hologram instead of using a controller or a mouse, and your brain already knows how to do it. In other words, we've designed an operating system that humanity has always known how to use. So you can see this eyeball, which is, by the way, photorealistic. You can see my hand is occluding the eyeball, and now the eyeball is occluding my hand, right? You see those two circles? They get small, and then they turn into this glowing white ball, and then I can move my hand around supernaturally. I can do this with two hands and rotate the thing. I can stretch it. I can throw it back right into the shelving system, and that's all you have to learn to become a modern worker.
And to prove this, the employees at Meta have started to get rid of their computer monitors, trading them in for Meta's augmented reality headsets. Mayron thinks that in less than a decade, we'll all be just wearing strips of glass that can project holograms.
In the early 80s, everybody had computers on their desktop, but no one was using them because they had a lot of work to do. So they were still using typewriters. And at some point, the CEO took all the typewriters away and everybody was forced to use their computers. So it's very exciting to see a new generation of technology, a new paradigm.
I consider us like pioneers in the holographic wild. I'm pulling up my browser with my hands and sending out emails to colleagues and just kind of really acclimating to the new environment.
Now you're putting on my computer, essentially. Our digital lives live on our phones. We have all of our pictures and notes and all these kinds of things. So why don't you write yourself a little sticky note? I like it. And go ahead and just take your fist right over the top of the sticky note and close your fist. And now...
Oh, what? Meta's own transition to augmented reality has run into plenty of unexpected problems. And it's still going to be a while before you'll start to see these devices in your office. But I think it's a future worth waiting for.
If we could see these holograms between us, we will have been able to share our work with one another more naturally, more efficiently, and more productively than ever before. Humanity will have evolved slightly.
This is Hatsune Miku, Japan's sensational virtual pop star. She's released over 100,000 songs in multiple languages and performed sold-out concerts around the world. Her image has appeared in games, on TV, in car races, and is even etched on the side of a Japanese space rocket.
I came from Hatsune Miku, Carlos.
She's Lady Gaga's favorite digital pop star and opened shows for her in the US 3 years ago. Tens of thousands of fans attended her exhibition and live shows near Tokyo recently.
理想のアイドルっていうとどの曲でもミクはすごい綺麗に歌ってくれる。
他没有缺点啊，没有任何让我们感到不开心的一些新闻。
She's everything to everybody. That's probably why she's so popular.
Miku's creator Hiroyuki Ito and his Sapporo-based company have been developing the virtual diva for over 10 years.
初音ミクとは、キャラクターとしてすごく、YouTube とかで検索すると、たくさんの初音ミクが出てくるんですけども、元々の、初音ミクのその原点は歌声を合成する、ソフトウェアなんです。
Both the software and character are named Hatsune Miku, meaning the first sound of the future. Originally based on Yamaha's Vocaloid technology, Miku the software has a sound bank containing voice samples and a huge array of tools. You input the melody and lyrics, then Miku the character sings them. To date, Krypton has sold 120,000 software licenses at $200 each to fans around the world who use it to create numerous songs and share them online. Some of the fan-created songs are chosen to be part of Miku's concerts, for which they're paid a royalty fee.
元々初音ミクっていうその、存在自体がそのボトムアップって言いますか、中にはクリエイターじゃなくて今もうすでに、プロになって活躍している方もいらっしゃるんですけども。
The company also has other revenue streams. It makes money from merchandising, licensing deals, and concert ticket sales. According to the real-life musicians who perform with Hatsune Miku, the virtual pop star is interesting and surprising.
今年で3年ぐらい、ちょうど3年ぐらいやってきて、ライブも数十本、数百本だったので、そういうことが演奏によって起こせる感じの、そういう器みたいな感じになって、初音ミクらしさって僕はあんまりない。初音ミクって何だってあり。
For Ito, Miku has the potential to change the way we think about music.
そういう新しいそのテクノロジーによって新しい音楽のあり方っていうものを模索していきたいと思っていました。
And for her fans, it goes even further.
ミクって魂がないので、だからみんな魂を作り上げるために存在しています。
Now, there are a lot of fitness gadgets out there. In my quest to get fit, I tested 17 of them over the last few months. At least one personal trainer I know was a little bit skeptical.
Yeah, I've been watching these new technologies come to the market for almost as long as I've been a personal trainer. They're just tricks and tropes. They're not much different than the Bowflex machines or, to be honest, the original Jane Fonda workout video.
But some of these gadgets that are just coming to the market do so much more than what they used to do, just tracking your activities. Out of all of them, this chest strap was my favorite. It comes with a robot coach that points to the future, one where you might not need a human trainer at all. And it works like this. You wear the chest strap so that it can read your heart rate, and that connects to Move's free app that talks to you.
Welcome to Move Heart Rate Hit Outdoor Running. Let's get moving and warm up in Zone 2.
Move's computerized coach tells you what to do at that exact moment, whether you're running outside or you're doing body weight exercises indoors.
Swing your arms faster to get your legs moving quicker. Let's crush this round.
And by reading your heart rate, she knows exactly how hard you're working. She keeps you honest.
Way to go, you are in the target zone. Keep pushing, you're almost at the end of the round. Don't give up.
I've been running for 7 years now, and my biggest problem is that I never push myself hard enough. I end up going on the same slow, comfortable 30-minute jog, but the Move HR Burn blasted me out of that rut. By the end of these half-hour exercises, I was drenched in sweat in a way that I never am when I work out alone. Training with a real person is great, whether that's your group instructor or your coach or your personal trainer. But humans, they're expensive. For the rest of us, this $60 gadget is all you need.
what does it take to change the world? A big army? A cure to a pandemic? A revolution? All of these take either a lot of people, thousands of hours, or massive amounts of space. But for Julian Assange, all he needs is one room, an internet connection, and the world will listen. Assange is located here, and more specifically, right here. And from that location, he's posted government secrets, classified documents, and leaked emails from some of the world's most powerful people. And in doing so, has been labeled a hero, a villain, a nihilist, and everything in between. This is how an Australian programmer sequestered in the Ecuadorian embassy in London became one of the most influential and notorious people in the world. Born in 1971 in Townsville, Australia, Assange has always been on the move. Living in over 30 homes by the time he was in his mid-teens, Assange, along with his mother and half-brother, finally settled down in Melbourne. His introduction to hacking started at 16 when he was given a Commodore 64, which he attached to a modem. He attended the University of Melbourne, where he studied programming, physics, and mathematics. He never graduated, but that doesn't mean he didn't get an education. By 1991, Assange hacked into the Pentagon, U.S. Navy, and other branches of the U.S. government. In 1996, he was caught by the Australian Federal Police and charged with over 30 counts of hacking and computer-related crimes. He didn't get any jail time, but he was fined $2,100.
I think the first taste of what would come later was the hacking that he did as a young programmer, and that really sort of foreshadowed a healthy skepticism of the use and abuse of technology by governments.
That's Vernon Silver.
I'm a reporter for Bloomberg's investigations team.
Assange's youth as a hacker laid the foundation for him to start WikiLeaks in 2006. What is WikiLeaks? It's a website that posts unfiltered, usually classified documents. What separates it from every other media outlet is that they have no editorial hierarchy. With a publication like the New York Times, information comes in, they take that information, package it, then disseminate it for the public to see. WikiLeaks, however, cuts out the middleman.
WikiLeaks gathers information, most of it given to them anonymously. So what they're doing is really very simple. They get the information in one end from who gives it to them and out the other with sometimes minimal interference. Julian Assange is the leader of that, the mastermind, the creator, and really, because he thinks of it as a journalistic enterprise, the editor-in-chief.
But every story starts with a source, and Assange has some unconventional sources.
Julian Assange does not hack as far as we know. He is the recipient of people who are either insiders who give him secret documents or hacked emails from a foreign power.
That's Eli Lake.
I am a columnist for Bloomberg.
And there was no source bigger for Assange than Chelsea Manning, who used to be known as U.S. soldier Bradley Manning. In 2010, Manning provided Assange and WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of leaked government documents. WikiLeaks quietly began releasing the documents in February of 2010, then made big headlines in April by posting what is now known as the Collateral murder video.
Come on, fire!
It was a vivid, graphic video. It changed the debate on the Iraq War, and importantly, it put WikiLeaks on the map when they put it online, and they couldn't be ignored at that point.
And those leaks were just the beginning. They went on to post more than 90,000 leaked documents known as the Afghan war logs, 390,000 documents known as the Iraq war logs, and 250,000 private messages between diplomats called cables in what is now known as Cablegate. These leaks were met with very real ethical questions.
The problem with publishing those cables was that a number of confidential sources for U.S. diplomats who faced real danger when their names were exposed.
Then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton drove the point home that
every country, including the United States, must be able to have candid conversations about the people and nations with whom they deal.
Shortly after Cablegate, the Swedish government issued an arrest warrant for Assange on allegations of rape and molestation. He claimed the allegations were fabricated to get him extradited to the United States, a claim the U.S. government denied. Either way, Assange's next move was
to seek refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, which really was the beginning of the new chapter in his life and what we're dealing with now, which is him being stuck in London.
What was supposed to be an office in an embassy is now Assange's self-imposed prison to this very day. But that doesn't mean he's slowed down. Since being trapped in the embassy, WikiLeaks has released files about Guantanamo Bay prisoners, Syrian political figures, and the draft to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then came the 2016 U.S. election.
Thousands of leaked emails showed Democratic Party officials possibly plotting against Bernie Sanders in his race against Hillary Clinton.
Over the course of 68 days, WikiLeaks released 20,000 confidential Democratic National Committee emails. In terms of the presidential race, if you look right here, when Assange released the first batch of emails, Trump actually takes his first lead against Clinton.
I think we've had enough of the Clintons, in all fairness.
Once WikiLeaks started exposing secrets of the Democratic Party, Julian Assange became a hero to many on the right. Public opinion kind of flip-flopped.
WikiLeaks.
From the emails, we now know Hillary Clinton's campaign manager makes risotto, and also how the DNC squashed Bernie Sanders' campaign. One thing we don't know is who gave Assange the stolen emails in the first place.
Many leading Democrats say they suspect it was the Russians. They released an analysis from a private cybersecurity firm that had said it was the Russians.
But Assange claims
our source is not the Russian government, and it is not a state party.
So this is where we stand today. The public still doesn't know who provided the emails to WikiLeaks. Meanwhile, Assange is still running WikiLeaks and still releasing documents. In March 2017, he started publishing documents from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence called Vault 7.
The CIA, the agency charged with finding and keeping our top secrets, can't keep its own secrets.
As long as Assange has a connection to the world, no government secret will be too far from exposure.
Julian Assange is still in the embassy. Maybe he'll leave, maybe he won't. Kind of regardless, his work has been done. He's changed the way people think about their governments, about their own secrets, about their own hackability, and really the world has changed because of him.
To expose everything you won't admit. And action. This entire video is based on a true story. When I do like motivational speeches or even tell myself like love yourself and you should love yourself.
This is Lily Singh,
But to fans all over the world, she's the YouTube star Superwoman.
What up, everyone? It's your girl, Superwoman. I know we can change the world for the better, one positive day at a time.
My parents now know what I do. They didn't know what I did for a long time in the beginning of my career. I was just making videos in my room. They had no idea.
Mom, Dad, have you seen my keys? I can't find them anywhere. Because you're always on phone.
Until someone called them, like a family member from another part of Canada, was like, Canada, is your daughter making videos? And the mom was like, I don't know, Lily, are you making videos?
Just making videos grew into an entire career. Today, Lily's YouTube channel has some 12 million subscribers, over 2 billion views, and guest stars like Michelle Obama, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and Seth Rogen.
I think a lot of young girls are raised to believe that you're gonna go to school and then graduate and then get married and then get a job and have kids.
And Lily was on that path, all the way through a psychology degree at York University in Toronto. But when she started thinking about a career,
I started to immensely panic and think something was wrong with me because I tried to figure out my life and it wasn't working in that straight line.
It was 2010 and YouTube was only 5 years old.
I thought nothing of YouTube. I was probably the last person in my circle of friends to discover YouTube. And I remember when I did, I thought, this is so strange. There's people making videos in their rooms and other people are watching them.
So she figured, why not give it a shot?
I one day posted a video because I was sad and I wanted to be creative and happy.
She didn't know how to edit video or write scripts, so she winged it.
It was so bad and so cringe, and my expectation was literally nothing. I was like, I'm gonna put this video up, a couple of my friends are gonna watch it, probably make fun of me, and that's gonna be the end of this. The second and third video came from, wait, 70 people watched my first one, can I get 80 to watch the next one?
She kept creating, she kept posting, and the viewers kept coming. Lily had found an audience.
A lot of the comments were, oh my God, there's a brown girl on YouTube.
More specifically, Indian. Lily's parents immigrated to Canada from India, and Lily was born and raised in Scarborough, near Toronto.
My home life was awesome. My parents, even though I portrayed them to be quite strict in my videos.
Oi, Lily, wear the rest of your skirt, huh? I teach you like this, to walk around like this, showing everything to everyone.
They actually aren't like that at all. They're pretty modern and pretty cool.
Your dress is short. Don't know what for.
And were pretty lenient with me. I mean, I got away with a lot of things. I was a brat. I was a brat.
She had a different idea of what she wanted out of life than other kids. In a grade school graduation slideshow, her classmates said they wanted to be lawyers and doctors.
And then I came up and I was like, rapper.
Making out with your friends, man. But then you say that you hate hoes.
I could just feel my parents being like, why?
Because that's just not something women really did in the Singh family.
I know there was a ton of people that weren't happy about my birth being a female, so I think, and that's some real-ish, but it's a real thing. The best thing I could have done to prove to so many people that didn't want my mom to have a daughter was to become Superwoman.
What up, everyone? It's your girl, Superwoman.
It was the name of Lily's favorite hip-hop song by Lil Mo featuring Fabulous.
I love the song so much because it was one of the only songs at the time that was an empowering female song, where Lil Mo's going on about, like, I will save guys with my superpowers, and I will save girls with my superpowers, and I am the Superwoman. I thought, this name that I've had for so long that empowered me when I was younger, I'm gonna make this my screen name.
Maybe there should be a new series.
Superwoman didn't just burst onto the scene overnight with a viral video. It was a steady climb fueled by hard work.
The moment that I thought this is going somewhere and this could be a career was the first time I performed internationally. It was in India. And it was the first time where I was truly across the world and people knew my videos.
Singh has transformed herself from a bratty kid to an internet personality to a media mogul. She started a feature film, A Trip to Unicorn Island, in 2016. And her book, How to Be a Boss, hit the New York Times bestseller list in 2017 while she was on a 30-city international tour. Lily started out with the goal of getting millions of subscribers and financial security.
Hurry the hell up!
But after surpassing those goals, success has new meaning.
I've really come to terms with the fact that my definition of success is what's the best legacy I can leave behind. And it's not the number of views, the number of subscribers. It is the number of people that can say, this girl changed my life or changed something in my life positively.
is often found in the brains of deceased athletes, military veterans, and others with a history of repetitive brain trauma. Hundreds have donated their brains to the VA Boston University Concussion Legacy Foundation Brain Bank.
This is a former NFL player who died in his early 70s, and this is a veteran who also died in his early 70s.
Dr. Ann McKee dissects these brains.
The hippocampus and the mammillary bodies are very important for memory. I can see that they're slightly affected.
McKee recently dissected the brain of former New England Patriots player Aaron Hernandez, who was convicted of murder and later committed suicide.
You'll see right away that the brain is showing signs of shrinkage. You can see the crevices in the brain that you can't see in the normal.
McKee says Hernandez's severe case of CTE impacted his decision-making, depression, and ability to control rage and aggression. Right now, she thinks we're underestimating how many people have CTE.
We were able to distinguish between CTE and controls and CTE and Alzheimer's disease. The next question is, can we do this in the blood, and can we do this in living people? And we aren't there yet with those answers.
But the need for a diagnosis in the living is motivating companies such as Quanterix in Lexington, Massachusetts, to work faster on technology that could diagnose concussions and CTE in as few as 30 minutes. Kevin Rosovsky is the CEO.
It's like a high-powered microscope. And so by doing that, we can see little biomarkers that you couldn't see before in the blood.
Quanterix received a grant from the NFL and just went public. Since then, its stock is up more than 40%. The company sells a machine called Simoa for $175,000 to other biotechs, hospitals, and researchers.
And for the first time in history, we're able to see brain health in blood, and that's a major breakthrough, and that's leading to less invasive testing, and we've already been able to see evidence of concussions, and there's the beginning evidence of being able to see the accumulated effect of concussions.
Quanterix is also trying to detect Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, and ALS. Rosovsky says he thinks diagnosing concussions will be easier than diagnosing CTE.
Diagnosing CT in the living probably is a couple years away. We're real excited to see the progress, but reducing some of that work into actual tests in a laboratory takes time. There's regulatory approvals. There's a lot of red tape that you have to go through.
Also in this race to diagnose CTE in the blood are Athlon Medical and Exosome Sciences. And New York's Mount Sinai Hospital is scanning for the disease in the living. But it's just one step in a series of questions for those with serious head trauma. There's still no cure for CTE.
Even if we had a great idea for a treatment, there's no way to test whether it's effective or not. So that's the enormous advance that we'll get if we can develop a biomarker for this disease.
In Boston, Ann Mostu, Bloomberg News.
Wine is a $300 billion global industry where one person's opinion can make fortunes or break them. That's because of this man, Robert Parker, and his newsletter, The Wine Advocate. For 3 decades, he dominated as the world's most influential wine critic. Now Parker's protege is building an empire of his own. Antonio Galloni runs Venice.
Antonio, tell me, what are you trying to build at Venice?
Well, at Venice, we started with the idea in 2013 of building a world-class platform. We have a database of about 250,000 professionally written reviews. On Delectable, we have 7 million user reviews. Through Delectable, we also have a partnership with Whole Foods and several other partnerships that we can't announce just yet. And when you put that all together, what we have is something that no other company in our space can even come close to.
Do you think of yourself as the next Parker?
Not at all.
Why?
Because Steve Jobs said you can't live your life trying to be somebody else. So he's one of my biggest influences, and I've never wanted to be a replica of somebody else because a replica is never as good as the original. Bob is a genius, fantastic, one of a kind. We're going to be something completely different, and I have no desire to be some version of somebody else.
Different in what way?
Every decision that I've made at this company is completely anathemic to what Bob did with his company. I want our writers to be partners. All of my senior people are locked into the company. They all have equity or they have a path to equity based on business results. That's something that we never had at Parker. Our benefits are world-class, and everything that we've done at Venice is completely different from that model. When Steve Tanzer, who is the most experienced active wine critic in America, wants to work with us, that says something. When Alessandro Masnaghetti, who's the best cartographer of vineyards, wants to work with us, that says something. When Neil Martin, who's a superstar wine critic with enormous experience in Bordeaux and Burgundy and the former lead critic at The Advocate, wants to come and be part of our team, that says something.
You make it sound like The Wine Advocate was a disaster as a company and a miserable experience as an employee.
No, it was great because I got to work with Bob Parker when he was at his prime, you know, and Bob was like a second father to me, and we talked on the phone all the time, and he gave me great advice.
Can anyone's palate dominate the wine criticism business the way Parker's did? And should anyone's palate dominate it the way his did?
I just think the world is very different today. You know, I mean, it's just a totally different world. It's probably not healthy to have a single person dominating the world.
It's not even wine criticism, it's the wine industry.
Yeah, that's probably not the healthiest thing in the world. But I think that there's just such an opportunity right now with social media and technology to reach such a massive number of people that I think it's possible that 1 or 2 people will actually have more influence than Bob Parker did, because they will, again, this goes back to your first question, not trying to be a version of somebody else. You see this in sports all the time. It's like, oh, well, nobody will ever beat this record. And then somebody comes along, you know, it's like tennis, Pete Sampras. Nobody's ever going to win as many Grand Slams. Now you have 2 guys who are ahead of that and 1 knocking on the door. And so I think a lot like that.
You're a former investment banker. How does that inform and influence what you're doing and what you've done?
My generation has had to deal with a lot more challenges. That's why I think we're actually much better poised for the future. My first job in finance, the first thing that happened was long-term capital, 1998. Then the tech bubble melted down. Then there was a mutual fund trading scandal. You know, that was all like within about 5 or 6 years. And these are the things that I had to deal with as a young executive. My peers who were 20 years older didn't know how to manage in crisis. They'd only seen Black Monday. They'd just been in a big bull market. It's very different. So I'm very lucky. People of my generation or a little bit younger have actually had to deal with a lot more crises. I think that's actually good for learning how to cope with challenges in business.
From the outside, it kind of looks like you're trying to demolish the house that Parker built, right? You left The Wine Advocate.
Yeah.
You merged with one of his chief rivals.
Yeah.
And you just hired his successor, Neil Martin.
Mm-hmm.
So are you?
I think what that says is that all the best people want to work at our company. And that's really what we strive to create starting in 2013. We wanted to create a world-class company that would attract the best-in-class talent, and not just on the content side, on the technology side, on the digital side, our office, and at every level, what we're trying to, we only hire superstars, and we're looking for those superstars.
In the world of professional wrestling, there's something called a swerve.
Hulk Hogan has betrayed WCW.
Some examples. These tag team partners are called babyfaces, or the good guys. Then one of them swerves when he super kicks his tag team partner in the head, quickly assuming the role of the bad guy, or what the wrestling world calls the heel.
Are you kidding? What a despicable act that was!
Or a match is almost lost when, what's that? The superstar wrestler appears out of nowhere sprinting down the aisle to save the match.
That's the Warriors music! That's the Ultimate Warrior!
That's a swerve. So it should go as no surprise that World Wrestling Entertainment, known as the WWE, the most popular brand of sports entertainment in the world, is prepared for any swerves that come their way. So here's the story of how the WWE learned to see the swerve coming. So I spoke to Bloomberg reporters Felix Gillette.
I'm a writer for Bloomberg News for the global business team.
And Kim Basine.
And I'm the U.S. luxury reporter at Bloomberg.
To find out exactly how the WWE is positioning itself for an all-out global invasion, which starts with a massive change to their lucrative pay-per-view model.
WWE basically pioneered the pay-per-view model on cable. I remember as a kid, when the pay-per-view events came up, all of our friends would scramble around and try and get one of the parents to pay for it.
But in 2014, they took a huge risk.
They saw a little bit sooner than some of the other entertainment brands that where this whole thing was moving was away from cable and satellite television and towards on-demand streaming video apps. They made this risky decision, in essence, cannibalizing that pay-per-view model, which they had essentially built.
And after some early turbulence, it's working. Roughly 1.5 million people are paying $9.99 a month for the WWE app, making it the 5th most popular streaming OTT service. This adapt-or-die approach is in the WWE's DNA. Over the past 30 years, the company always seems to think 2 steps ahead. In the early 90s,
WWE was at its most threatened when Ted Turner took them on with WCW,
which stands for World Championship Wrestling. And back then, the WCW was winning the ratings war. So in order to compete with them,
WWE had changed its product from a family-friendly kind of cartoonish style to this really raw. That's why they called their show Raw. It was this raw style of wrestling.
With violent, outrageous, reality-inspired plot lines and aggressive personas.
From a 16-foot ladder!
And they won that fight against Ted Turner. And they bought WCW.
The early 2000s ushered in an era of testosterone-driven programming aimed at the red-blooded American male.
Bra and panties matches, and people smash each other over their head with like barbed wire bats and things like that.
Until 2015, when WWE fans started a hashtag Give Divas a Chance. Since then, WWE has hired 40 more female wrestlers, and that growing cast of female characters was part of a much larger plan.
They started to try to appeal to a broader set of people.
Let's attract more female fans. And after we've attracted more female fans, let's attract more international fans. They're broadening their base, and they're doing that in large part to make it more advertising friendly.
And not just friendly to advertisers.
They're trying to build up their fan base in China. They're trying to build up their fan base in Europe. They, already have a pretty good fan base in India.
India is a place where they already have an established wrestling culture.
Because of the gigantic Indian wrestler, the Great Khali. But there's still a lot of work to do. While the WWE set a revenue record in 2017, only 30% of it is coming from an overseas audience. And there's one person whose responsibility is to grow that number.
The buck eventually stops at Vince McMahon, no matter what's happening within WWE.
Yeah, he's a very controlling guy, and it's a very, very, very tightly scripted company.
And that goes all the way down the board to big stars' entrance music. And their outfits and things like that.
So with a CEO like McMahon always planning 2 moves ahead and an aggressive push into multiple international markets, a big issue is money.
It's hard to do all those things simultaneously without committing a huge amount of capital to it.
And that's where the WWE becomes an attractive company for buyers.
Potentially, one thing that could happen with WWE is they could benefit by being acquired by a bigger technology or telecom company, an Amazon or Facebook Facebook or a 21st Century Fox.
So with a market cap of $2.8 billion, the advantage of owning 100% of their own content, and a rapid consolidation spreading throughout the entertainment industry, it looks like the WWE is well positioned, even if there are swerves.
Thank you very much for coming here.
Thanks for having me.
I've always been relieved ever since you were appointed, because at least until your appointment, I seem to have the most unpronounceable name. But now we will keep it as Dara and John. This conference is called The Year Ahead, but in your case, you are close to 6 months into the job. And I wondered what you saw in terms of the year ahead at Uber as your biggest challenge. What's the thing that you think about most when it comes to 2018?
We definitely have our share of challenges at Uber. And for me, where I want to get Uber to the year ahead is a year of normalcy. 2017 was, I think, will go down as one of the most difficult years for any company out there. And I have to give credit to the Uber team and the employees there. It is a group of true believers who believe in our mission, who believe in mobility as a service being available to consumers everywhere at a reasonable cost. And what my job in 2018 is to get rid of the distractions and get the company back to business, get the company back to normalcy. There's a lot that we've done in the past 6 months as far as bringing in new investors, driving a new culture and norms where doing the right thing, period, comes first, bringing a new management team, et cetera. There's a lot that we've gotten done, but this is a company that knows how to execute. This is a service. Mobility as a service is something that's universal, that's needed in the world. And I just want to get back to doing business.
It's quite interesting. You said true believers.
Yeah.
Normally, true believers are the last possible people where you're able to change a culture. Can you explain a bit about that?
Well, I think that they understand that mobility as a service, bringing the cost of transportation down, making transportation services available to anyone and everyone on a local basis, and partnering with cities to be a solution to traffic, to pollution, et cetera. That is a mission that they all believe in. And I think that they, having seen what happened in 2017, to some extent the crisis, the enormous crisis that the company has gone through, is a benefit because everybody at the company knows now that we need to change, that we need to break with the past as far as the way the company was run. We need to go from growth at any cost to responsible growth and growth in partnership with other players out there. That's clear, but now I've got to kind of get the company down to the normalcy of execution, of building great technology, and I think we're going to get there. It's still some tough sledding early on, but I absolutely think we're going to get there.
When you talk about execution, is profits one of the things you want to get? I think you lost $4 billion last year.
Well,
peanuts by the standards of
profits will help. So at some point, we absolutely have to become profitable, and that's part of the plan.
Do you have a kind of goal for that? Do you think you should be profitable by 2022 or by 2020?
I think that we'll be profitable before 2022. This is the business itself.
Do you want to come back a bit closer, 2020?
Yeah, listen, it's not going to, I don't want to name a specific year, but this is a business that the core business, the ride-sharing business, can be profitable within 3 years. We will continue to make very aggressive investments in building out autonomy because we think that's a terrific opportunity for building out new technologies such as Uber Elevate, where near-term profitability is not a goal, but long-term growth is. So we will look to balance near-term profitability, but as a company, we will always be a company that makes big, bold bets and takes big risks.
To what extent, though, do you think that drive to become profitable fights against a little bit of this culture change? If you want to make, you talked about making money, but not at all costs. Do those two things spar against each other?
I don't think that profitability and culture are their issue. It's the company in the past was willing to make trade-offs as it related to how it did business, and I think was guilty of hubris, was guilty of thinking that they knew better than others, and I think that what we know now clearly is that breakneck growth can hide cultural issues, that there are no excuses for not doing the right thing, and that you do have to make trade-offs. And as a management team, we're specifically talking about those trade-offs that you have to make. We have to be a little more patient sometimes because working with governments, regulators, et cetera, sometimes takes longer, but in the end, you build a more lasting business. And so maybe what we went through was necessary, but we're here. We can control our actions from this moment onwards, and I think everyone at Uber from this moment onwards wants to build a great company, not only in terms of growth, but in terms of the kind of company anyone would want to work at.
Can I ask you one thing which you have got a sort of hangover from last year, which is all the regulatory problems, and particularly all the cases against you? I think there are 6 criminal probes or whatever going on.
The lawyers are lining up outside the door.
Which one do you sort of think? Which one do you fear most? I suppose out of these different things.
Listen, I think that all of them are serious issues, and my response is that we're going to be transparent and we're going to take responsibility for our actions in the past. I do think that there are certain circumstances where there was smoke but no fire, and I think as a company we have to defend ourselves and work within kind of the appropriate frameworks. And my goal is just to get beyond this stuff.
Some of these things like pricing policies, surely they go right to the heart of what Uber is, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I think they do, but I think that there's a way of being smart but transparent at the same time, and that's where we've got to take the company.
Take me through governments. When you talk to governments privately, do they talk any differently than they do publicly?
Governments?
Yes, governments.
I think that they are honestly a bit relieved with how we are engaging with them, because I think that the engagement is now real. I think they feel like we're out there, we're genuine because we've learned our lessons of the past, and I do think that we can take, for example, the data that we have in terms of traffic and in terms of movement of our drivers and riders, and we can use that data to partner up with cities in order to solve congestion issues, because congestion doesn't help anyone. It wastes enormous amounts of time for consumers. It hurts the environment. And I think that we are aligned with cities, for example, to partner with them in a fundamental way to solve these problems. And I do think that when these are conversations that a number of regulators and cities have wanted to have with us for many years, and I think we are really engaging with them at a depth that I think is going to create a real win-win going forward.
Do you think you were too confrontational on this before?
Yeah, I do. I think that the company was pushing growth. And listen, any innovator, to some extent, the innovation is about questioning past kind of present practices. It's about breaking things, the Facebook breaking things. We just went a step and a half too far. And what I want to keep, hopefully, is the best of both worlds, which is this spirit of innovation, the spirit of can-do, et cetera, but the responsibility of partnership. We don't know better than you. We're actually going to work with you, of actually having dialogue and respect for our city partners, for regulators, and then continuing to take risks and continuing to do daring things. And I think we can accomplish that.
Imagine this audience here is a collection of mayors or a collection of city officials, and you want to depict, this is the Year Ahead conference, depict what the years ahead in this thing are going to be like. How far is driverless cars going to go? You talked just a few days ago about the idea of there being flying cars in 10 years' time. Can you just give a description of what you think transport is going to look like?
Well, I think that we think there are three keys to transport and where the industry is going: autonomous, electric, and shared. And I think all three are necessary in order to get to the next level of city planning, et cetera. There are many cities where up to a fifth of the space taken in these cities is taken by parking and storing these cars. And so I do think that you need autonomous, you need electric, and you need shared. And I do think it's going to take some time. True autonomy for every single use case is some ways away. What we bring to bear is our developing autonomy, and we will have autonomous cars on the road, I believe, within the next 18 months, not as a kind of a test case, but as a real case out there. And over a period of time, we're going to bring autonomous transportation and feather it in with the non-autonomous transportation with drivers.
What does feathering in mean?
Feathering in means
to a layman like me? Crashing.
Yeah, feathering in means if you're, for example, in Phoenix, and you make a request to go from A to B, which is what you do with Uber, there will be 95% of cases where we may not have everything mapped perfectly, or the weather may not be the right weather, or there may be an accident on the road, or you may not have 2 or 3 ways of getting from A to B, where you may say, you know what, that's not an autonomous use case. We're going to send a driver to pick that person up. For 5% of cases, everything is going to fall into place. And we will send an autonomous car. The user will be able to pick, do you want, there's an autonomous car, yes or no? And we'll be able to service that A for B. That 5% is going to go to 10 and 15 and 20 as our computers and our algorithms learn more and more about what it takes to drive in a city in a real life situation. And every minute of every day, that driver, that computer is going to get better and know Phoenix better and better and better. And in 5 years, we'll have the perfect driver in Phoenix. We will have to retrain that driver in every single city. We're going to have to build out 3D maps of these cities. And it will take time, but over a period of time, you essentially have a driver who becomes the perfect driver. It'll take 10 to 15 years, but that's the feathering in that I'm talking about.
And will a child born today, will they ever need to learn how to drive?
A child born today? No, I don't think so.
So within sort of 20 years from now, we will...
I don't think so. Listen, I hear some groans.
And also,
I heard a couple of groans. 1.3 million people die from car crashes every year. 1.3 million people die from car crashes every year. That doesn't count an estimated 20 to 50 million people that are injured. Okay, this is actually a public safety issue. If you look at cars, 96% of cars, 96% of time, cars are sitting there not being used. It is a huge amount of pollution that's caused by these cars being in the road, and a huge amount of wasted time. So the safety is there. Electrification is absolutely key, and sharing these platforms is going to allow us to be much safer and also put our assets where they add value.
But it's quite interesting because when you first came in, I remember you sounding somewhat more skeptical about self-driving cars. You've been converted. Is that a?
The choir has spoken, and I'm listening. It's pretty exciting technology out there. But again, it will be a hybrid technology for some period of time.
What about flying cars? That came as a slight surprise.
Yes, that's a great project that we're working on. It's called Uber Elevate. And it is actually about battery technology.
It would have helped a lot of people here.
I know. I wish that I was available. We'll launch it here if we can. But battery technology is allowing us to have multiple rotors on planes, or helicopters, if you want to call them that. These rotors that are much smaller will be much quieter than helicopters are. Much quieter, much safer. If you add sharing into the equation, you can actually get the economics of going from A to B. We think within 5 to 7 years to a place where normal people would think about taking these flying cars. That'll be the beginning, and then it's about scaling. And we're working with a number of partners right now.
Do you think the regulation on flying cars, I've heard some proponents of it argue that it might be easier than it has been on driverless cars, because driverless cars, you have to deal with existing roads, existing everything. Flying cars, essentially you're going into unconquered space.
I think that mayors that are forward-thinking understand that traffic and pollution are a real issue, and I think flying cars can be a significant solution to traffic issues in cities. And these cars, to start with, they're going to be very specific. They'll be kind of highways in the air. There'll be very specific routes that these flying cars go on. They're not going to be able to take you to your backyard and land in your backyard. There'll be these skyports. So there'll be very specific routes that you go on. And I think if you build a regulatory framework that has that kind of structure around it, I think you get to a better solve.
Can I drag you back, somewhat reluctantly, back to the real world? But you have Rajiv Misra, who came in with you from SoftBank.
Yes.
He's going to become a director. Last week, he said that Uber should focus on repairing its market share in the US and on key European markets, rather than going to new ones. Do you agree with that? Is that the way you look at Uber?
I think one of the fundamental strengths of Uber is the global scope that we have. This is
you
a brand.
Had that motto, everywhere. What's it? Everywhere for everyone.
Yeah, everywhere for everyone.
Do you want to make it some places for some people?
No, we like the everywhere for everyone. It's much sexier than some places for some people. That's
telling me.
Just not interesting. I do think seriously though the global scope that our company brings is important. Our being able to build technology that we can amortize essentially everywhere in the world is hard, but it is part of the fundamental value that we introduce. So I would look at Uber very much as a global brand. That said, we're going to look at all opportunities, but at this point, we are leaning forward. In 2018, for us, is going to be very much a lean forward year for the company.
But without, I'm not trying to create new boardroom tension at Uber, but that would appear that SoftBank is keener on a more limited idea, whilst you're keener on everywhere for everyone.
Well, listen, SoftBank is a very important shareholder. They're our largest shareholder, and many of our shareholders have opinions over what's the right thing to do. Ultimately, the governance of the company is going to be at the board, and we'll have those discussions at the board, and we'll set our long-term strategy and then execute on it.
One of the things which Uber played, perhaps not very fortunately, a role in was the whole sexual harassment questions and everything to do with that. I suppose one very obvious question: do you think that you have solved that part of the culture? But secondly, do you think that this is a real revolution and it's going to stick?
I think that what was happening at Uber was serious, and I think that while what Uber went through was difficult, I think the Susan Fowler blog was probably one of the best things that happened for Uber, and it certainly started a movement that's an incredibly important movement of the company. I'd be reticent to say that it's solved.
Yeah.
But it's not an endemic issue within the culture of the company, and I think the company has learned, and I think the company took very harsh and appropriate steps to make sure that kind of behavior is absolutely clear, that kind of behavior is not accepted in any way, shape, or form of the company, regardless of where you are, regardless of if you're a great performer or not. So I think we're at the right place for Uber as a company, but I think in general, we're not where we need to be in terms of women in senior positions, making sure that we're welcoming of women in technology, and we help women really build their careers within our company. There's a great kind of bottoms-up energy there, but we're not where we need to be, and we have a lot of work ahead of us.
On the issue of, you talked about the top performers, is that looking back, and also I suppose looking forward for many of the people in this room, because there are a lot of people's businesses which have been affected by this. If you had to give lessons to other people who are now looking at this issue, perhaps more seriously than they have done before, is the really bad issue, and I suppose I'm thinking some ways about the media industry in this, is that giving top performers more room for maneuver or whatever than people, or more discretion than people thought? Is that top performers need to be treated the same as everybody else?
I think they absolutely need to be held accountable. One of the really valuable lessons that I got early in my life was actually through Jack Welch, and he said, it's very tempting to allow top performers to misbehave in any way, but for me, he was talking about being aligned with the CEO. Sometimes you allow top performers. The tendency is, well, let them get away with some kind of behavior that is not the right behavior because they're so good. And what Jack told me very early on is that it's the top performers who are problematic culturally that are the most dangerous, because they have followership within the company, because people look up to them. So he's like the dumb person who is bad culturally. He's not the problem, because everyone says, well, that's a dumb person, so who cares? It's the smart person who has followership. So it is incredibly important for the top performers to actually be held to account more radically than anyone else, because they're the ones who have followership at the company, and they have to set the example. So for me personally, that has absolutely guided how I've managed. Expedia was a company that had, excellent cultural values. And one of the first things we did at Uber was to go out and reset our cultural values, and we call them norms, because to me, it's not just these values that you put on the wall and kind of people stare at and it's all nice. It's about behavior. And we set out to change behavior at Uber, and I think that the company was thirsting for it, and we are starting on a path, and I believe it's going to be a positive path.
An inevitable question, I hope you won't regard it as a cheap shot, but you talked about smart people who have followers throughout a company. I mean, Travis would seem to be the epitome of that sort of figure. Do you think of him as being in that category of people that Jack Welch was talking about?
I think, listen, Travis was the CEO of the company, and he had incredible followership, and he was held to account, right? I mean, he's no longer the CEO of the company, and he's a board member. He's a big investor, and so he's absolutely going to play a part on the board. But we've also been very clear as a company that we do have to make a break with the past, with how we behaved as a company. And to some extent, with the new CEO being a very different kind of a CEO. So in the end, you have to be held accountable, and I think that Travis was held accountable, and at this point, he's a board member and a constructive one at that.
If you look around the world now, where do you see the next competitors to Uber? You've obviously got Lyft breathing down your neck.
Yes.
Where else do they come from?
Well, I think that as you move into a world of autonomy, the position of the car manufacturers, the position of, for example, Google, who's developing Waymo and Waymo autonomous technology, you're going to get a lot of players interested in the space. And a lot of people think about Uber and ride sharing as a significant enterprise, and it is. But the fact is that we account for less than 1% of miles driven on the road now. When autonomy comes in, that number over the next 10 years is going to be closer, I believe, to 15 to 20%. So because we're not yet a true alternative to car ownership, and I believe that as you bring autonomous and you bring the price of mobility down and make it available to everybody, everywhere, then we become a real alternative to car ownership, and that really opens up the market for us, but it also opens us up to many more competitors.
And is Google at the forefront of those competitors at the moment?
Google is one of many. I think that they've developed very strong autonomous technology, but what we think, which is exceptional, is having autonomous technology and the network under one roof, which allows us to use autonomous in a very practical way, nearer than you think.
HD2 Brookline, Boston, WNBP Newburyport, KNEW Oakland, KOSF 103.7 FM HD2 San Francisco, and Sirius XM Satellite Radio Channel 119. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Friday afternoon from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week Radio. I am Paul Sweeney alongside Alex Steele, and we are sitting in for Carol Masser and Jason Kelly. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm good. I feel like mom and dad are gone, and
Yes.
like the kids are going to play, and like we don't know what's going to happen. It could go so many places.
It could, and we have 4 hours to see where it goes. We're going to have an interesting first hour here, Alex. So we're going to get the latest on the virus and the vaccine. We're going to do that with Dr. Ian Lustbader from NYU. Going to get some smart thought there. And plus, a really interesting story in the Bloomberg Business Week magazine, how Moderna wants to transform the body into a vaccine-making machine. So lots of people working on, lots of different companies working on lots of different vaccines are trying to keep on top of that. Right now, let's head to Charlie Pellet. Let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash. Charlie, what do you have for us?
What we've got for you is a mixed market right now. You guys have fun today. Just wrap it up by 6 p.m. Here's what's going on. The Dow, the S&P, they are both higher. NASDAQ on the minus side. Stocks trading near records as Investors Digest report showing the economic recovery slowed. Treasury debt yields fell for the first time this week. S&P swinging between gains and losses. Real estate, industrial, and energy sectors are the biggest gainers. Here's where we stand. S&P up 3. That is a gain of 0.1%. We've got the Dow up 67, up by 0.2%. NASDAQ on the minus side now down 18, a drop there of 0.2%. 10-year yield 0.70% this Friday. Gold retreating by 0.6%, down $11 the ounce at $19.41. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.1%, $41.76 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie Pello, thank you so much. We appreciate that. I'm calling this, Alex, a sleepy Friday summer kind of trading day, and that's okay with me. Right now, let's get that Bloomberg Business Week agenda. Let's get that going with Bloomberg News. Global macro strategist Vince Signorella and Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Vince, let's just start with you. We had a kind of a quiet summer trading week here. What are you hearing from the traders out there as they think about kind of some of these markets, kind of where we are right now?
Hey, good. Nice to thank you for having me. A lot of what I'm getting from traders, and I'm kind of getting the same feel myself, is we're looking at this at like halftime. It's been a really good run for risk, good run for metals, good run for equities. Dollar's been on a nice bear trend leading into this month. A lot of guys I'm talking to, given the fact that stimulus is not at least going to happen until September, with no deal being reached, and that we're going to face August with probably worse numbers than July because of the lack of income, the personal income. A lot of folks are starting to take some money off the table, not on necessarily a permanent basis, just taking back some profits, biding their time. And as one guy said to me, he goes, "This is halftime. I've seen this show before. I'm stepping back, and I'll come back to you after Labor Day."
Hello, Vince. Did we lose Vince?
No, I think he's there.
I don't know, maybe
Oh, you're still there.
Still,
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know you. I felt like you stopped mid-sentence. Sorry, might be.
Sorry.
So
shut me up, impossible. Come on.
well, that's what was weird. It's not going to stop talking. So clearly his connection just phased out. So Dave Wilson, you were saying the same kind of thing earlier, that second quarter earnings, we're done. Like, what's the catalyst? What strikes me though, sure, volume's light, but just how much the U.S. is outperforming Europe again. I feel like the last week has been the case. That wasn't the conversation we were all having like 3 weeks ago.
No, because there was some thinking that you'd start to see a pickup around the world, but so much is tied into how the coronavirus is progressing. I mean, when you have cases coming back to New Zealand, which have basically gotten rid of the virus for weeks and weeks and weeks, I mean, you know how things can shift. And you look at today, no direction really for stocks here in the U.S., but across Europe, losses of 1% or more. And you go through the European benchmarks and you see a lot of declines that are sharper than we've seen here in the U.S. Now, you can tie it into kind of the big tech companies. You think about the Apples and the Microsofts and the Amazons. They're here, they're not elsewhere. Well, today they're not moving all that much, really. I mean, little change to down maybe 0.5%. So, you can understand the market's lack of direction by looking at these few companies just right off the top.
Yeah, it's interesting. Vince, I'm actually surprised, and I'll say pleasantly surprised, that the market is kind of held in here in the face of no fiscal stimulus. I thought the market was kind of discounting as recently as, a couple of weeks ago that, all right, at some point, Congress is going to get something done before they head away for the summer, but it looks like they're still pretty far apart.
They are really, really far apart. But I think hope springs eternal among the guys on the street. I think we see this little sideways pattern, and I think what they're going to do is they're going to build in what we talked about, bad numbers for August. Okay, so maybe we don't get the bounce in the third quarter. We'll just get it in the fourth quarter. They just keep kind of kicking the can a little bit. They don't believe that going into an election, 435 House seats up for re-election won't somehow get to a result. And, of course, the presidential election won't get to a result that's going to provide stimulus and that's going to leave people going hungry as they head to the polls.
Weird that Vince kind of sounds optimistic.
Yeah, exactly.
Vince, what I feel like what the big story this week was yields and the backup in yields. We saw a rise in inflation expectations in the UMISH also. And I just wonder how traders are interpreting that. Like, is that a genuine I see inflation down the road jam, or is this growth scare situation, steeper yield curve?
I think the latter. I don't think they see this as inflation, but I do think they definitely see this as what we were saying before, as an opportunity to get out of metals and maybe an opportunity to get out of equities a little bit. And that you're seeing this pickup in real yields. It's not significant. It's not going to affect the currency very much, because the currency across the board, real yields are low across the world. But when you start to see real yields higher and the potential that they could go even further, people now starting to take some profits and take some stuff off the table where the metals go, I think, more than anything else. And that's, I think, where they're seeing that. We got a long way to go from inflation.
Hey, Dave, a name that's actually moving a little bit today is one that's near and dear to my heart, Viacom CBS. Maybe some speculation that an active investor might get involved here?
Yeah, I mean, what happened was there was a firm, Gordon Haskett, that went through end of quarter filings and found that Credit Suisse had bought close to 13 million shares. It's about a 2% stake. And so, the analyst over there figures that, Credit Suisse has done this sort of thing, at least in his view, before for people who kind of want to stay under the radar, and that may be, the case this time. And to have that come just a couple of days after Sumner Redstone, who had the controlling voting stake for National Amusements, died, I mean, it really does get your attention, no question. And by the way, we're going to get a whole lot more of those filings. By day's end, we'll have Berkshire Hathaway for starters.
Yeah, but so backward looking, man. See, the 13Fs really annoy me because I get it. We all want to know what everyone buys, but it's so backward looking at that point. I'd much rather hopefully revive Robin Track instead, which is basically what was tracking Robin Hood.
Fair enough, but I want to know if Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway are buying more of Apple for starters.
That's a good point. That's a good point. We'll have to pay attention to that. Vince, what are you going to do over the weekend?
Yeah, what are you going to do? Well, first he's going to drink a little bit circa 4:03.
Yep.
Yeah, well, actually more like 4:18. Potentially, if my neighbors have their windows closed, I'll light a cigar out back. That's the plan, at least, I'm hoping. I'm expecting a quiet weekend. My kids are back from college finally, all graduated, all incredibly unemployed. So we're all going to commiserate and try to figure out how to find them jobs.
Yeah, exactly. You and me both. So hopefully things will turn around here, but we'll have a good weekend here. Vince Signorello, thanks so much for joining us. He's global macro strategist as well as Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. And it's interesting, Alex. Again, my question to Dave and Vince was the market's kind of showing some resilience here in the absence of that fiscal stimulus that we were all looking for.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and I also think that you can turn it the other way too. Like SocGen coming out and saying a good virus news is now baked in. Then you have Goldman Sachs says you could see 3,600 on the S&P if U.S. growth and if vaccine sort of comes. So it's like, then what's baked in? If we're not going down because of no stimulus, then how much more upside though do we really have?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's all about the Fed here. The Fed has been so good with the liquidity into the marketplace and shows no signs of changing. Right now, let's head down to World and to Washington, D.C., our 99.1 studios. We'll get world and national headlines, and we can do that with Nancy Lyons. Nancy.
Thanks, Paul. President Trump is blaming Democrats for preventing him from helping those struggling during the pandemic.
I've directed the Secretary of the Treasury to get ready and send direct payments, $3,400 for a family of four to all Americans. Democrats are holding this up.
Both political parties have supported sending another cash payment to families and individuals, but the sides cannot agree on other aspects of a relief bill like the price tag. Democrats have said they'd come down $1 trillion to $2 trillion, but Republicans say that's a non-starter. A top official with the United Arab Emirates says the response to a new deal with Israel has been fantastic. UAE Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Anwar Gargash tells Bloomberg one key to the agreement is Israel's pause in annexation.
I would say there were certain, principles of how the Israeli-Palestinian issue would be resolved. Annexation would have changed facts on the ground.
Gargash says he talked with UAE's allies only after the call with President Trump and Israel. The U.S. is pushing the UN Security Council to extend an arms embargo on Iran. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
We can't allow the world's biggest state sponsor of terrorism to buy and sell weapons. I mean, that's just nuts.
It's expected the U.S. request to prolong the embargo will fail. Sticking to the topic of Iran, the U.S. says it has caught Iran transporting oil to Venezuela in violation of sanctions. 4 tankers carrying over 1 million barrels of petroleum were seized after help from foreign partners. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts.
All right, thank you very much, Nancy Lyons. Alex, a fascinating story just hit today, and I think a lot of folks in New York are going to be happy. New York City museums can reopen, I think, just in the next several days. So that's good news for folks that missed going to the Met and all of the Museum of Natural History and all the other great museums here in New York.
Yeah, whatever. What really is cool is that maybe on Monday, Cuomo is going to announce potentially reopening of gyms or how to reopen then I'm all in.
Then you're all
I'm
in, okay.
totally with you on that. Hey, I love culture, sure, but I'm the kind of person that needs to go to a museum in a different country. Like, it's
Right.
really hard for me to like get up at 10 a.m. on a Saturday and like go to the Met. That's my husband's jam. I'm like, can we not do that?
All right,
go
so
to the gym.
if gyms do open, you'd be comfortable going to a gym?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Eventually when it gets cold out, I mean,
Yeah.
I gotta be honest, I'm still on the fence. What about you?
I don't think so. Well, I wasn't a big gym person, but now I've become all in on the Peloton, so I don't need a gym. So I feel like I'm doing enough with the Peloton. But I guess if they're going to have, reduced occupancy, and if they're going to have some, hazmat crew there wiping down the machines all the time, then maybe. But there's actually been some gyms in Jersey that just said, the heck with it, we're staying open, and governor, come shut us down if you want. So I understand people who are committed to their workouts are really, really feeling the pain of not being able to go to their gyms, and they're trying to, I guess, do the best thing outside of the gyms. But a lot of people really want to get back to the gym.
Well, my hip really feels the pain of running outside on hills. So
yep.
so that's partly why I want to go back to the gym. But my daughter's going to go to school in the fall in the hybrid program in public schools in New York. So she's doing that. Like, what's the difference of going to the gym if I wear a mask?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think but we'll see. I think it's going to be a gradual thing. We'll have to play it by ear. But opening up the indoor stuff, that's where the risk really comes. And we've seen that from the European countries who kind of, let open the bars and indoor issues. And they're having resurgence in some of those European countries that had kind of beaten it down. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
I tend not to do shots at the gym, though. So there's
That's
that.
right. Okay. We'll have more on this coming up. This is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Light volume. Where is everybody? Trading volume about 30% below the 30-day average. Stocks trading mixed right now with the S&P up to, that is a gain of about 0.1%. We've got the Dow up 57, higher by 0.2%. NASDAQ remaining lower this Friday, down 25 points, dropped there of about 0.2%. Bottom line here, stocks continue to trade near records as investors digest reports showing the economic recovery slowed. 10-year, the yield there, 0.70% this Friday. Gold down 0.5%, 19.45 the ounce, and a retreat for crude down 0.9%, 41.87 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, let's continue our efforts to get a little bit smarter about this virus and this vaccine. To do that, we can welcome Dr. Ian Lustbader, clinical professor of medicine at NYU. Dr. Lustbader, thanks so much for joining us here. Let's just start with kind of, I guess what's on everybody's minds as we wind through August is reopening schools in New York City. The virus is still out there. We don't have a vaccine. What do you think the city should do with the schools?
Thanks, Alex and Paul. A pleasure to be with you. It's definitely a challenge. You know, Dr. Fauci and others have talked about regional differences. I think in New York and the Northeast in general, we're in somewhat of a more fortunate space with decreased hospitalizations and dramatically decreased deaths from, you know, the peaks in March and April. So I think generally that's good. I've got a number of patients who are both students and teachers and professors, college professors, kids going back to college, and everyone is nervous. And no question, outside better than inside. But once people start getting into classrooms, there is a bit of a higher risk. The good news is generally, young people tend to do better with this disease than older people. But that doesn't let off the hook the professors and teachers, many of whom are older, many of whom have risk factors, including weight issues, diabetes, blood pressure, you know, all of the risk factors that we know caused really higher mortality during the peak. What many places are doing is testing, doing swabs, and we know that that's helpful, although there's both a false positive and a false negative rate. So having a negative swab doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're free of COVID, although it certainly is highly suggestive that the virus isn't there. And I think exactly as you say, it's going to have to be a step-by-step process and see as you go. Cohorting people, in other words, having the same group of people together, whether it's in the morning or in the afternoon or separate classrooms with a little bit of space between them will be helpful. And in that way, if someone in that smaller group gets ill, you can sort of isolate that group and not affect the entire school. That's sort of hopefully going to be the strategy. And in a way, that has to be the strategy, whether it's sports or colleges too.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because here's what's confusing to me. It's like we might open museums, right? We may open gyms. We're not opening movie theaters, but we're opening schools. And it feels like there's so much more risk in schools than in any of these other places. Like I can keep a social distance when I'm at the gym, but my 6-year-old is definitely not going to do that.
Right. No question. Once you start moving indoors, there is a higher risk, which is the rationale behind hopefully testing even youngsters, whether it's spit testing or nasal swabs. The smaller group cohorts, you certainly can't guarantee that. Fortunately, again, younger people do tend to do well. And it's important to get ventilation. Ideally, in the best of all worlds, we would spend some of the money, the millions and billions that are being spent in New York, in air purifiers and ultraviolet lighting.
Oh, it's so pretty to think so, right?
It would be pretty to think so. There are some mitigation efforts that can be done, even in older buildings. No one really has done that. So it's unfortunately back to the same environment. But some of this may be hybrid learning. We've talked about that with some online stuff. And even a few hours, I think, can be beneficial to kids. They need the social interaction. Teachers are not so happy about this, although they're not happy with remote teaching either. But kids learning at home really have a have a deficit. They need that social interaction. They need that human engagement. And parents can't go back to work unless their kids are in school at least part of the day. So it really is a Jenga puzzle where you really need to get all the pieces together.
Doctor, what are we learning as we go on day by day, week by week, month by month with this virus in terms of how long it may live? Is it mutating? Things like that. Give us a sense of kind of where we are in the study of that.
Great questions. All of these pandemics, even in 1918, were self-limited. In other words, 1918, there were several waves. We may have another wave. But really, after 2 or even the third year, it did go away. Either herd immunity develops or you get a vaccine. So this is finite. I know it seems like this will never end, but I think we are very close to a vaccine, a good vaccine, a little unlike the Russian vaccine. Our vaccines are now being tested in phase 3, some of them, 30,000 people, where you can really begin to see, are there side effects? Are there any unexpected problems like Guillain-Barré syndrome or other complications? How effective it is? So I think by January, February, the first vaccines will really be available. And I think that combined with common sense, masks, social distancing will enable us to get back to a more normal existence. But it's still a dangerous virus. This is different than 1918. It's different than flu. This coronavirus variant has mutated. In general, the virus tends to mutate in a little milder form because if you kill off your host, you lose too as the virus. So the virus has in some ways mutated. It may mutate again. We worry about too many mutations because obviously you're raising a vaccine, and if it mutates too much, that vaccine is no longer effective. But it is a protein virus. In other words, most people do well, young people do well, but the people who don't do well, it's devastating. We see strokes, we see heart disease, kidney disease, and long-lasting effects, abnormal liver tests, cognitive effects, emotional effects, depression that last months.
Yeah, this is going to be, I think we learned a lot, certainly here in New York and around the country as we dealt with that. Doctor, you're going to stay with us. That's the good news. We'll talk about vaccines. We'll talk about therapeutics. That'll coming up in just a few moments. Alex, it's really interesting here. Just the images from just a few months ago of the overrun hospitals. I know Tom Keene posting on Twitter, the tents outside of Mount Sinai in Central Park. We certainly don't want to go back to that.
No, but January, February of next year, I have no concept of time anymore.
Yeah.
I literally don't know how long that is.
Yeah, I know.
I can't articulate it.
All we can hope for is that we continue to make progress on therapeutics and on vaccines. We'll talk to Dr. Lustgarten on that coming up. This is Bloomberg.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
I'm Paul Swinney. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I'm alongside Alex Steele. We're sitting in for Carol Master and Jason Kelly. Coming up, Dr. Ian Lustbader. He stays with us, and we'll talk to him about the virus and the vaccine potential coming up. But first, let's go to Charlie Pellet. We'll get a Bloomberg Business Flash. Charlie, what do you have?
Hi, thank you very much. Mixed day right now, Paul. Final trading day of the week. Stocks mixed as Investors Digest report showing the economic recovery slowed. Let's get right to the numbers. With the S&P up now by 2 points, higher by 0.1%. The Dow up 47, up about 0.2%. NASDAQ is lower by 24, a drop there of 0.2%. 10-year yield 0.70%. Gold down 0.4%. 19.45 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.4%. 42.08 a barrel. Stocks are trading mixed again. Recapping on the S&P up 2, up by 0.1%. American Airlines has started banning so-called valve masks from its aircraft. Dr. Andrew Pekosh is a professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and he spoke this morning with Bloomberg Television.
You've seen a lot of people that wear these masks that have small valves on the side. Those are probably not the best to use to block transmission because those masks function to filter air that's coming in, but they don't do a good job of filtering the air that you're breathing out.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. First day of trading for Duck Creek Technologies. It's a software provider for insurers. It is higher in its trading debut after raising $405 million in an IPO that was priced above the targeted range. DCT is the ticker right now. Shares are up by 41.7%. Recapping equities mix, the Dow up 45, up by about 0.2%. S&P up 2 points, little change there. NASDAQ down 23, a drop of 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie Pellet, thank you very much. Duck Creek, that would be very difficult for me to say, so well done. The race for the vaccine, that is what all drug companies are aiming for. Earlier on Bloomberg Television, my co-anchor and I, Guy Johnson, we spoke to the CureVac CEO, Franz Werner Hans. The company IPO'd today. They opened at 44. They priced at 16, so that's a nice pop. And we talked to him about the race for a COVID-19 vaccine.
It is a race not that much against the competition of other vaccine producers out there. It's a race against the virus. It's a race against the time. To be fast is really key here. You need to be safe and efficacious with this vaccine, but to be the first one in the market doesn't mean that you are capturing the entire market in order to, because you have to produce it, you have the vaccine available. That's one thing. The other thing is really that you need to have a protective vaccine. As it is a new virus, nobody knows really today what kind of level of protection you need to generate by your vaccine in order to be protected on the one side and how long you want to be protected. And therefore, we have been optimizing our RNA to come from a low dosage with a long protection. At the end of the day, we will see which vaccine works the best, and this is all depending on data, and data which we haven't seen so far.
Joining us still is Dr. Ian Lustbader, a clinical professor of medicine at NYU, on the phone from New York City. So, Doctor, what do you think? Like, how aggressive are we in the race to a vaccine?
Yes, this is really uncharted territory, and I agree with what was said before. One, in terms of prevention, the valve masks certainly don't really help those around you, because if you have it and you're exhaling, you're exposing other people. And I also agree with the comments about vaccine development. This is uncharted, and technology is uncharted. We're doing messenger RNA, for example. Moderna and others are using the mRNA technique, where they take messenger RNA that, is normally used to synthesize proteins. It's injected, goes into your own cells, and your cells then make this spike protein, which is, we think, characteristic of the coronavirus, and your body forms antibodies, which should hopefully be protective. There were various techniques to, different kinds of inactivated vaccines and other viral enhancements. So we don't really know what is the most effective. Maybe all of them will be effective. And it's good that we have somewhere in the range of 200 companies looking into this, but really only a handful, 3, 4, 5, that are in phase 3 trials. And that's very important because that's really where you look at tens of thousands of people, some 30,000 people, to see are there specific groups that it works better in or not? Are there side effects? Are there complications? And that's really important before we can reassure people, the population at large, that these are safe and effective. Is it 1 dose required? Is it 2 doses? All of that has to be worked out in a very slow and systematic way. But it's good we have a lot of companies, because eventually we're talking billions of people on the planet and potentially billions of people who will need protection. Even if you've had COVID, many people lose their antibodies. So even if you've had it, unless you're following antibodies, basically everyone should get this vaccine. And everyone should also, coming up in the fall, get this flu vaccine because you certainly don't want to get COVID and influenza at the same time.
All right, so, Doctor, the risk, I guess, with any vaccine is, will people take it? And I'm seeing reports that maybe a third, some surveys have been taken, maybe a third of people won't get the vaccine. What's the risk for the general population there?
Good points. We see that with flu vaccine. We see that with many vaccines, other than, of course, kids where they're mandated to have vaccines before they start school. So when it's voluntary, there are always people who say, you go first, you try it, and I'm suspicious. As long as we get the 50 to 70% of people in this country, at least, either vaccinated or with antibodies, we can develop a herd immunity. So not everyone needs it. Personally, I think if you're at a risk group, really over age 50, let's say, or have underlying problems, it would be crazy not to take it because the risk of dying from the disease is far greater than taking the vaccine or any complications that we've seen so far. At least early in development now, we have not seen any bad problems. That's why you need phase 3 studies, though, in larger populations. But I think when those vaccines come along December, January, February, we'll have good data, and hopefully people will be reassured about doing it.
Dr. Ian Lustbader, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your insight and your experience in this field. Dr. Ian Lustbader, clinical professor of medicine at NYU. I guess, Alex, kind of thinking about that January, February, March timeframe, somewhere in the new year, maybe starting to get some of these vaccines into the marketplace.
Would you take the Russia vaccine?
No. No.
Would you take one of the first ones in the U.S. to come to market?
I think if it went through reasonable testing, yes, but I'm not an at-risk group, I don't think. But I think, some of the first responders, I suspect, would be pretty willing to take it because, some of those, they face some much higher risks.
Yeah, no, fair. I mean, you do have some gray, though, so I'm just saying.
Yeah, sure, yeah. No, you're exactly right. Thank you for pointing it out.
I can't see you, but I remember you.
Lots of gray hair, you're right. But I think I will certainly be willing once it gets through some of these phase 3 trials. Yes, it's rushed relative to historicals, but if you get through a phase 3 and you get the FDA, I'm all in. Right now, let's get a check on the latest world and national headlines with Nancy Lyons in the Bloomberg 99.1 studio in Washington.
Thanks, Paul. Lawmakers are heading back home from Washington without a pandemic relief bill to show to their constituents. Bloomberg's Amy Morris with the latest.
The two sides are about $1 trillion apart on the package of relief. Democrats warn cities and states will be facing severe cuts to services. Republicans argue the money will wind up bailing out states that were poorly managed. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says the Senate is in recess until after Labor Day, while House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says Democrats will return to the negotiating table when Republicans are ready to provide $2 trillion in pandemic relief. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Democratic presidential hopeful Joe Biden and his running mate Kamala Harris took time today to sign documents concerning their candidacy.
We're going to make this official. We're signing our request to get on the ballot in each of the states.
Meanwhile, President Trump is expected to visit his younger brother Robert in the hospital today.
We've had a great relationship for a long time, from day one. It's a long time ago. And he's in the hospital right now, and hopefully he'll be all right, but he's having a hard time.
It's unclear why Robert Trump is in the hospital. He was previously in intensive care in a week back in June. Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. is urging a district judge to reject President Trump's latest challenge to a subpoena seeking his tax filings and other records from his accountants at Mazars. Judge Victor Marrero will review the new findings now that the U.S. Supreme Court has rejected Trump's argument that he's immune from state criminal investigation. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts.
All right, Alex, let me ask you a question here. Crime is spiking in New York City. The pandemic is worse in urban areas. You're a New York City resident. Are you thinking about leaving the city? That's what I saw on a Bloomberg story today.
No, definitely not. But, you know, I'm born and bred, and I grew up in the Upper West Side in a certain decade where, like, if you went past a certain street, it was no bueno. So I feel okay about it. But, I mean, I do feel like this story is quite interesting because there's a couple things that happen. One is the push against the police force, some might argue, has led to more crime. The other part is there's been a pandemic that also depletes those first responders and the police force. People also may not be working, they're cooped up, it's hot, like all of that leads to potentially more crime. I will say, though, that the homeless situation here is much worse than I think I've seen it in quite a long time. And people are already leaving the city because they want more space, and I just wonder, like, how much people leave and don't actually come back this time.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you know, you're reading more and more stories about rents coming down in the city, like that supply and demand, which was really favoring the landlords really for the last decade plus, really not there now. It's kind of working for the tenants here, seeing lower rents. So that's certainly being reflected. And again, the question is, once everything is opened up again, will those people come back? I know my daughter, for example, she left the city. She's with us in Jersey. She says she's going back, right back. And so there's those types of folks as well.
Yeah, it's true. It feels very different than like a 9/11 thing, where we had sort of the same issue. Here's one stat for you. So there was a professor who basically tracks movement and population in the city, and she said that as of early July, 20% of Manhattan's population has decamped. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
And it's not just like regionally, just in one spot, right? It's going to be like all over. I don't know.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting to see how the city recovers. Again, it recovered after 9/11 very well. Let's see how it plays out here. We'll certainly follow that.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks now trading mixed. The S&P just moving lower since our last update, down now by 2 points, drop of about 0.1%. Investors digesting reports showing the economic recovery slowed. S&P holding close to records. Real estate, industrial, energy sectors the biggest gainers. Technology and utilities fell. NASDAQ is down 35 points, a drop right now of 0.3%. NASDAQ 100 index also down by 0.3%. So the S&P looking at a 2-point drop now, down by about 0.1%. Light volume on this Friday. 10-year yield 0.70%. Gold down 0.5%, 19.43 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.5%, 42.04 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie Pellet, thanks so much. We appreciate that. Alex, as we've been talking about this afternoon, there are a whole host of companies around the world really working on a vaccine for this virus. And there's a fascinating story in the Bloomberg Business Week this week where Moderna wants to transform the body into vaccine-making machine. Let's dig into that story with Joel Weber, editor of Bloomberg Business Week. He joins us remotely from Massachusetts. And Bob Langreth, healthcare reporter, Bloomberg News, on the phone from the swamps of Jersey. Joel, welcome to the program here. Talk to us about this interesting story about the folks at Moderna.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So this is a story, in our vaccine issue this week, and I frankly don't think you could have had a vaccine issue and really not had a Moderna story. And so this was one that that Bob had been working on for a while, and the thing that we really, I think, focused on is Moderna's name has come up a bunch this year. The stock has been obviously one that everyone's been keen to watch. But really, the underlying technology that they're using for their vaccine is actually a pretty radical approach. And it's not one that's ever been used for any vaccine ever. And we have no idea if it's actually even going to work. But the promise of what they're working on could really upend vaccine development if they can figure out how to do it. And Bob, I'll kick it over to you there. What are they attempting to do with this mRNA approach to vaccine development?
Well, this is like a whole new technology, and as Joel said, it hasn't actually been used in any approved products before. But basically what's happening, instead of the old way where you'd actually, for a vaccine, you inject like a whole virus, like an inactivated or killed virus, or part of the virus, like a viral protein, here you're just essentially injecting viral genetic material, RNA, and that'll ideally get into your cells and use your own cells to kind of become the vaccine-making factory and kind of spew out viral proteins that'll then stimulate a protective immune response. And so that's something that's never been done before in an approved product. But if it can be done and it does work, it has some potential big advantages in terms of speed and ease of production, of new vaccines for all sorts of, other different epidemic strains in the future. So this is kind of like a big test case. These are the Moderna vaccine and another similar one from Pfizer and a German company, BioNTech, that we wrote about, the first messenger RNA vaccines to go into late-stage trials. So this is really going to give the world, a first look at, what these vaccines are like and how well they work in people.
Here's an important question. How do you extra R in there? Paul, you put an R in there. It's a Mo, is it Ma? How do you literally say that? I'm totally being serious. How do you say this company's name?
I don't know the answer to that. I've just been saying what I said, and the company hasn't corrected me, but, I am not the expert. You should actually go to the company. That's a good question. They may have a slightly different preferred pronunciation.
I'm going to call on the break. Okay, my actual other question is, how does what Moderna is doing stack up to like what the Oxford vaccine is going to be?
Well, sort of both of them are, essentially newer technologies, with the messenger RNA being kind of the newest of all. But they're both relatively newfangled technologies. The Oxford vaccine uses something called adenovirus. It's like a different type of virus to kind of carry in RNA for as kind of a vector to carry on RNA from the coronavirus. And there's a few different vaccines are using a similar approach. It's called a viral vector approach. That is, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is using a somewhat similar approach, as are some of them coming from China. But the basic way to think about it is both of these are, relatively new approaches. With the adenoviral vector approaches that Oxford is using, have had somewhat more experience and more testing before.
So, Bob, given that this is a relatively new technology, does that suggest that Moderna's potential vaccine will not be the first to market? It may actually lag some of the other ones out there that might be using more tried and true technology?
No, so the advantage of messenger RNA and the reason that so many of the early ones into final stage testing, are messenger RNA vaccines is because it doesn't use any living cells or living viruses in the production of the vaccine itself. It just uses RNA, which can be synthesized in a lab. It's a fairly standardized process. The front end of the vaccine development is much, much faster. And so I think Moderna was able to get, working with the National Institutes of Health, was able to get their vaccine, I believe, into clinical trials in just over 60 days from when they started in the project, which is just extraordinarily fast. So that part, is faster. What hasn't been done before is no one has produced any of these RNA vaccines at a tremendously large scale before. So that's and Moderna's trying to do that with some of its partners, but that's also a total unknown.
So, Bob, there are other companies other than Moderna who are working on, mRNA and similar approaches. Who are they? And then outside of COVID-19 and the immediate application of the here and now, what other vaccines could this technology be used for?
So there's a whole bunch of companies now working on mRNA vaccines, and the most obvious competitor that we talk a lot about in the story is BioNTech, which is led by a husband and wife team that was working on cancer vaccines for many, many years, and more recently turned to infection. And they are partnered in infectious disease vaccines, and they are partnered with Pfizer. They're also in a final stage trial, and they're neck and neck with Moderna. And as far as we can tell, we don't know a lot of the details. It appears to be a pretty similar vaccine to Moderna from what we know so far. And there's some other mRNA companies that are a bit further behind. There are some groups in England that are working on mRNA, and there's also a German company called CureVac that just did an IPO that's also working on an mRNA vaccine. So, this technology is out there, and there's a whole lot of mRNA-based entries. And then what was the other question?
Well, forget the question. Let's have the answer, because I just called Moderna. So now I know how to say this company's name, by the way, if everyone's listening.
Yep.
Moderna.
That's right. What's the
Moderna? You're putting an extra R in there, man.
Was I?
You're doing
maybe
something
it's just
weird.
my Jersey accent, maybe.
Is it because you're from Jersey?
I don't know. We can always blame it on that. We appreciate it. Joel Weber, thanks so much for joining us. Joel Weber, editor of Bloomberg Business Week, remotely from Massachusetts, and Bob Langworth, healthcare reporter for Bloomberg News, on the phone from New Jersey, with a fascinating story talking about Moderna. Wants to transform the body into a vaccine-making machine here. So lots of progress being made, Alex, on a lot of different fronts by a lot of different companies, and you just hope some of these smart people can, get this thing over the finish line sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I just still worry about the whole cost implication, because for smaller companies like CureVac or Moderna, they need to have a profit at some point, right? They need to have money in order to go and make more stuff. But if you need to do that, then how do you get the vaccines to the emerging markets and developing nations? I think the distribution is going to get kind of ugly.
I think that has to be figured out way beforehand. Hopefully some smart people are thinking about it now, because you're right. There are haves and have-nots in this world, as we know, and we got to make sure that this gets out on an equitable basis here. So certainly we will follow up on that. For those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, and watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week continues. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is next. We will keep the conversation flowing. We are looking here at the markets here. Mixed market, S&P down about 3 points, Dow up 5 points, NASDAQ down 35 points. I call that mixed trading on a sleepy Friday in the summer. We'll have more coming up. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg World Headquarters. I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading. The Dow fluctuating between